Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 9th, 2012 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It's my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on both sides of the room. Any of those who would like to follow along, you're welcome to pick up a copy of our agenda. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items on our agenda tonight, as well as a segment of the meeting where we will entertain public comments on matters not appearing on tonight's agenda. So there will be an opportunity for general comments as well. It is our custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this point in time, I would invite everyone to please stand and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If I could now ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin. Here. Commissioner Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Here.
Commissioner Durkin.
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck.
Here.
Commissioner Schnell. Here. Mayor Tully.
Here. Thank you very much. It brings us to item 3 on our agenda, minutes of prior council meetings. We have one set of minutes from our October 2nd, 2012 meeting to approve. Are there any questions or comments or corrections, changes from any members of the council with respect to those minutes? Hearing none, a motion to approve, please.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. Thank you very much. I have one proclamation this evening, and I know we're going to hear more about the activities surrounding Fire Prevention Week, so I will not steal that thunder now. Whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department sponsors an annual fire prevention program, and whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department's primary concern and interest is the protection of safety for life and property in the village of Downers Grove, and whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department renders a vital public safety and prevention service in the village of Downers Grove, and whereas the observance of Fire Prevention Week provides an excellent opportunity for individuals to check for fire hazards and to test smoke detectors in their homes and businesses. Now therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of October 7th through October 13th, 2012 to be Fire Prevention Week in the Village of Downers Grove. And I will present this at the appropriate time to our Fire Chief, Jackson.
Who apparently is preventing fires right now because he's not here this evening.
Well, he should be. So that's a great way to kick off the week. Well, that's the only proclamation that I have. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda, which is the promised segment for public comment on matters not appearing on our agenda tonight. This is the segment where we entertain general comments. So if there are any members in the audience tonight that would like to make a comment or ask a question of the council or staff with respect to any matter not appearing on our agenda tonight, we would welcome you to please come down to the podium, give us your name and address, and we'd love to hear from you. Seeing no one racing to the podium, we'll move on. Item 5, we have no public hearings tonight. We'll have a public hearing soon, but not tonight. It brings us to item 6 on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items listed on the consent agenda? Any questions or comments from any members of the village council with respect to any of the consent agenda items? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Schnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin.
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin.
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett.
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck.
Aye.
Mayor Tully.
Aye. The consent agenda items have been approved unanimously. Brings us to item 7, our active agenda. We have no active agenda items tonight, so it brings us right to item 8, which is our first reading or our workshop portion of our meeting, where items are presented for discussion only and action at a later point in time. And as is customary, we turn this portion of the meeting over to Village Manager David Fieldman.
And not in our traditional fashion, I'm actually going to present an item tonight. It's
Wow.
the Charles Place redevelopment agreement, and we do have some photos and visuals that I'll call your attention to. This is Charles Place now. It's located on Mokel Drive, just north of our parking deck. You can see a very beautiful building, well constructed. But I will direct your attention to what it used to look like. This is the same property, then known as Hart's Garage, circa 2005. So how did we get from Hart's Garage to the Charles Place? Well, a little history. In 2006, the village entered into a redevelopment agreement with 3 Lights Development as an effort to facilitate redevelopment of that property. 3 Lights completed most of the project, but then filed for bankruptcy in 2011. Obviously, subject to the downturn of the economy. Greenscape Ventures acquired this property earlier this year, and they are requesting a new redevelopment agreement. And it's important to note that no TIF payments were ever made under the old or existing or original redevelopment agreement. I want to go through the key terms of the proposed redevelopment agreement, which will replace the old redevelopment agreement from 2006. In fact, the adoption of the new agreement will declare the old one null and void. It is very similar, however, the proposed one is to the intent of the original. Under the proposed agreement, there would be a maximum incentive of $426,000 that could be provided. The revenue generated from this development in the form of incremental property taxes would be used to make the incentive payments. And here's how those incentive payments would be structured. Incentive payments for the first 5 years, beginning in 2013, would be the lesser of 75% of the incremental property taxes, or $60,000. And then for years 6 on, or until the TIF district expires, or until the $426,000 is paid off, the incentive payments would be the greater of 50%, or $60,000. Now, this new redevelopment agreement requires the completion of this project, and there's a definition of completion in your materials, by July 31st, 2013. And it's important to note, under the proposed redevelopment agreement, there would be no restrictions applying to this building beyond the regulations that are found in our zoning ordinance that apply to all the properties in the downtown area. So I wanted to put up on the screen a comparison between the original agreement, which would be declared null and void, and the proposed agreement with Greenscape Ventures. You can see a side-by-side comparison here, walking you through the same concepts that I just showed in the picture format in the previous slides. But I want to wrap up with this. The proposed agreement is consistent with the intent of the original agreement, but the amount that would be paid is reduced from $470,000 down to $426,000. The new agreement requires completion in 2013, and that generates additional revenue for the TIF district in the form of completing, selling, and ultimately occupying all the tenant spaces within this building. With that, Enza and I are happy to answer any questions you may have, and Ken Newman from Greenscape Ventures is also here if you have any questions of the petitioner.
Thank you, and thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Newman. We'll begin with entertaining any questions or comments on this matter from any members of the audience. I know you want to. Any questions or comments from any members of the Village Council with respect to this item? Commissioner Chanel.
Just what percentage of the building is presently complete? I mean, that's tenants or condos have been bought.
I believe 46% of the first floor is complete.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Newman may have additional stats on the balance of the building as well.
Okay. And then the second question is, what is the definition of complete?
Completion means the developer has leased or sold 90% of the space in the building.
Okay.
Right now, most of that building is complete to a level of what we call in the industry vanilla box,
right,
which means it's ready to be occupied, and they have to make an amount of improvements when the ultimate tenant or owner gets in there.
Okay.
But 90% of the space has been leased or sold.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, and it's on, the definition of completion is on page 6 of the proposed agreement.
I know that, but for the audience, I think it's good to at least have people understand what complete means.
Sure. Let's take it one step further. Completion is achieved when developers shall have in combination leased directly, leased in conjunction with other condo unit owners, or sold to owner occupants a total of 90% of the 29,700 square feet of rentable space in the building. Rentable space includes each condo unit's allocable share of common area. Any other questions from, I'm sorry,
That.
didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Other questions from the council? Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, real quick, the 2013, what's the date of the 2013?
July 31st, 2013. And this is time to make sure that we can tell if the building has been completed per the definition before we actually release any of the payments under the agreement.
So right now, we're at 47%, we're gonna go to 90% by July 31st?
That's correct.
I'm gonna ask the question, but I'm sure not gonna get an answer. I mean, what are we gonna, how's he gonna do that? How are they gonna do that?
Well, he's already got
Today's
a,
economy, I mean, the other previous owners couldn't do it. So is that a reasonable number, a reasonable date?
we believe it is in conversations with Greenscape Ventures, Mr. Newman, in the actions taken to date since he's controlled that property when he purchased it earlier this year. So perhaps Mr. Newman could share with us some of the concepts of how they're going about getting it completed by that time.
I don't wanna take away marketing secrets or whatever, so if you don't wanna comment, I totally understand that. I just wanted to ask the question, so.
Well, and while Mr. Newman is coming up to the podium, if the completion target isn't met, then the benefits of the revised agreement
Are gonna come.
are going to come, so there's no downside to the village, other than the fact that we prefer to have it fully operational. So there's a strong incentive for that target to be met.
Exactly.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mayor Ken Newman from Greenscape Ventures. We bought this building through the process we went through back in March. The building at that point was just over 50% vacant. With the closings that we've already done, moving people in the building, and the contracts that we have under contract, 2 of which will close next week, and contracts pending, so signed documents, we're over 80% right now. And how have we done that? It's real simple. I'm doing a lot of development in your town, just for the record, and it's a matter of just having stuff on the market that there's a demand for, the price is correct for the demand that's there, reasonable and prudent, and we're being very successful. In fact, we're really, in our opinions, richly blessed to have very active conversations on every suite in the building, and it's quite possible we'll finish before the end of the year. We are aggressive in pricing and positioning and all those kind of things that we need to be.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Well, as long as Mr. Newman is at the podium, let me just ask, is there anyone on the council that has a question of him, so we're not having you come back and forth? Otherwise, we can
Thank you.
thank you for,
No.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Please, Commissioner Waldeck.
Let's see, I would imagine that the pricing and everything that you're doing is really based on having the redevelopment agreement.
It is, correct.
Okay, so if there's no redevelopment agreement, everything just kind of explodes and,
It changes the financial equation for sure, including one of the suites on the first floor, which is in front of us and will close actually next week, which is a long-term local business practitioner from the downtown Downers Grove area. It's the third practitioner that we've had, 2 of them being dentists, 1 of them being a chiropractor, that want to be on the first floor of the building, approximately 2,700 square feet. Current redevelopment agreement does not provide for that usage, but there's no demand for the retail aspects of the requirement that's in the original redevelopment agreement in this current marketplace. And so there's definitely demand if you can provide the opportunities for businesses at the correct price, of course, and certainly meets all the codes and requirements.
okay, thank you. I kind of assumed that, but I had to ask. And something that, I don't know if we're planning on discussing that up here or not, but in the original agreement, we had arranged, or it was written in the agreement that 70% of the occupancy would be retail space. And in the TIF district as a whole, I believe it was going to be, I forget what the exact number was, more like, was it 50% or?
I think it's about right, yes.
So, and then when we had a retailer come in the neighborhood there, and I won't name them, but there was a bit of a controversy because a lot of our downtown retailers were kind of upset that the business coming in wasn't really retail. And that what we sold in the original TIF district years ago was the fact that not only were EAVs going to go up to pay back the residents, but also that we would be getting sales tax. And each time we cut a deal in the last several years, we're knocking down the idea of retail and sales tax. So, you know, we really haven't kept that agreement. We really haven't kept that promise. And I was kind of going back and looking, the agreement here was originally 70%, and And last minute, we got a letter from downtown management suggesting that we do something to improve retail, because not only is it just sales tax, but it's also getting traffic in our downtown area, which was, the whole object was to be able to play, work, and shop in our downtown. So what I'm hoping for is maybe a discussion up here as to some type of a retail arrangement, maybe even an incentive of some kind to make the first floor retail, so that we kind of meet our goal of having more retail in our downtown area. And I don't know what the incentive would be. If it was just sales tax, I'd be proposing a pilot payment in lieu of sales tax. But I think it's more important that we get, that we do something to get the traffic down there. And just having office space, I don't know, is there some type of arrangement that we might be able to talk about to get that retail space in that building?
Well, let me interject a couple of points that I think Commissioner Waldeck has already brought up. First of all, the concept that the general mix in the downtown is about 50% retail, 50% non-retail commercial. I think that's some statistics we had going back to 2005, 2006. What's interesting is the Acadia development also ended up at almost exactly that same mix, 47% retail, 53% non-retail. This development right now would be 46% retail as defined by downtown management on the first floor, and then about 50% commercial, non-retail. So clearly the market has been consistent about this half and half ratio. I also wanted to point out that you did receive a letter from downtown management. Their point, I think, can be found at the bottom. They really had two major points. One is the mix of businesses that are currently in the first floor of Charles Place is desirable and acceptable to that board. That consists of the Olive Tap and the Galleria Salon. Interestingly, the Galleria Salon would not meet the definition of retail in the current redevelopment agreement. But downtown management is happy with that mix, and that's right at 46% of the first floor. Downtown management would like to maintain a 50% restriction on that first floor. That would really affect the property going forward, because when you look at that letter, they're really saying that Greenscape Ventures should have the ability to lease or sell to anybody who meets the zoning ordinance in the balance of the empty space in the first floor. So the real question then is, do we keep a restriction in going forward so that the mix has to be maintained at 50%, or do we not have this restriction? The combination of Greenscape's Ventures' desire to sell the properties as condos means that we really wouldn't have an entity to go to other than individual condo owners to enforce a retail restriction. And that leads down a path of other conversations, like if there's two owners in the first floor, which one of you can be retail and which one can't, and how is the village going to regulate that? Also is absolutely in line with the market. It appears to staff that the market forces are driving a 50-50 split throughout the downtown and in Acadia and in this building.
So what we're really saying is that any retail that goes in there would basically be a condo-type retail business.
I believe, and Mr. Newman can correct me, I believe the part of the strategy is to sell all the spaces as condo eventually.
That's correct.
And then
Owner-occupied units.
And then lead that to a management group, condo association type of thing. Okay, just something to consider. I was hoping to be able to get more retail in there. If there was something that we could work out incentive-wise to improve that, I'd definitely be interested in that, because we definitely want the traffic down there, and I think downtown management has a good point. But if we're looking at 50% rather than 70, we're only talking about a 4% difference. Okay, thank you.
We can come back to that.
Yeah.
Let me just ask, are there any other questions specifically with Mr. Newman? Then we can have our discussion and allow you to sit down.
Well, I thought he would answer rather than our village manager. That's okay.
Thank you.
Either one was fine. Thank you.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. Speaking of downtown management, as the liaison there, I was at their last board meeting, and they actually started to sound a lot like a policymaking board, because they were having a lot of the same discussion about what if and can we and how do we work with both sides of this negotiation. And I think the letter we got from them, as Dave said, does kind of sum it up a little bit, as the market says right now 50-50 split is kind of what we're seeing. You know, it was a really good conversation at the Downtown Management Board, but I think personally my choice up here is to let the market dictate what we do. You know, I think that this agreement puts us as a village in a position of capturing you know, a complete building, which it hasn't been for a number of years. And while in a perfect world, we would love to have a complete building with the whole building being retail sales, because then we're getting the best of both worlds. But as we talked about a few years ago with another section of our downtown, we can't necessarily always tell people where to go. We do have an agreement here, so we can put some restrictions. We tried that with the original agreement and didn't get very far with that. So I appreciate the work that's gone in to try to get to a point where we can get the building full in a relatively short amount of time, and that's, I think, the ultimate goal. We do have our say in how our zoning ordinance is, and there are specific things that can and can't go into that use downtown because of the downtown business zoning componentry of it. So, you know, I hear what the rest of our colleagues have to say, but I think that for right now, this agreement looks pretty good. Downtown management, again, had a very healthy conversation so far as to, one of the comments was to, well, what do we classify as salon, and can we talk about the zoning of a salon, and is it a retail, you know, sales tax generator because they sell some products, or is it a service? And so we had a really good conversation there. But from my perspective, I think that this agreement puts us in a good path for the future, and keeping the TIF expenses down a little bit from what they could have been with the previous agreement. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Commissioner. Other questions, Commissioner Barnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Have we gotten actual EAV relief on this parcel? We gotten an increase in EAV?
There has been an increase in EAV that happened right when the building went up initially.
Okay.
And there was an initial increase in the EAV, so there's a very modest amount of incremental taxes being generated. That will grow, obviously, when the project is completed.
Can we estimate what that growth would be and what the time frame for that adjustment would be?
We can. However, there's a couple things that have happened in the marketplace that make it more difficult to predict what's going to happen in TIF districts. Number one, we're in an environment of overall declining EAVs village-wide and frankly region-wide. What that does then is while that is not necessarily the case with this particular building, in fact, we think this building will grow in EAV as they complete it, but that environment of an overall declining EAV means that other taxing bodies continue to levy the same amounts or more, schools, parks, et cetera, that drive up the resulting tax rate. And so what's happening is there's a greater unpredictability of how much revenue will be generated by any particular development in the downtown or the downtown TIF district as a whole. So because there are two components of this moving in an unprecedented fashion due to the Great Recession, we are not able to pinpoint it as well as we used to prior to 2008. So what did we do about that? That's why we have the lesser of, greater of concepts that you see on here. This allows more certainty for the village in the first year so we can get a handle on how the recession and property values are affecting this agreement. And then the last years, the developer has a better handle on what they can expect as a return. So maybe not quite what you asked, long-winded answer. It's hard to predict now, and we have protections in place.
No, but it's a good answer, and it underscores some of what makes me think this is probably an appropriate course to take. At the end of the day, we all have, I'm sure, our own wishes about what we'd see in any one spot, but sticking with the zoning regulations and likely having a development that tends to match the balance of our downtown, while at the same time accelerating whatever EAV growth is likely to occur by accelerating the completion date, and at the end of the line, reducing the amount of actual TIF financing that's likely to be part of it, seem like, you know, a whole series of box check wins in terms of tomorrow if this were passed versus yesterday without it. So I'm inclined to want to go forward with it, and I think it probably brings, you know, more certainty to an uncertain situation and helps our very fragile downtown TIF.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
I would just like to say that, you know, history has shown us that retail is a challenge in that location. I mean, let's be realistic that it backs up to the parking garage, and I think that's probably why we're here having this discussion. So I think I will be supporting this next week.
Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you. You know, that zoning regulation, retail/office, you know, is a concern of mine, but I do know that we did make that change in the, what was the name, Acadia on the Green. And I really think that that was the right decision during those economic times, which I truly believe has brought more people into our downtown. And I do agree with Commissioner Waldeck to a sense that, you know, we want to get more people there, but I think really with the office spaces, because, and the only reason I'm saying this because I didn't agree with taking away the sales tax 100% on the first floor, is that I think in the long run what is happening is as we get more of the office suites there, there's more people coming that aren't necessarily Downers Grove residents, which they're captivated to that area and they're going to be in that area shopping and eating and buying groceries and everything that we hope they're doing. I'm saying they are doing, so I'll put my leg on the line with that one. But the question I do have, because we have made these changes from PUD agreements, will this have any future effect or possibly have an effect on our ability to put some similar stipulation in any new development that we see in the downtown? I mean,
No, it would not.
Would not.
Each agreement is individually negotiated. And I think the key to this is, remember, these agreements are not precedential. These are privileges. And
Okay.
they are things that we do not have to grant. We only grant them when it makes sense for both the village and the developer. And if things change and the economy is robust again going forward, then you may see development agreements with restrictions back in. It will also depend on the location of any new redevelopment agreements as well.
okay. Well, I will be, if you're doing a straw, we don't do straw.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
But I will.
No straw, no head, no.
Supporting this based on the information gathered tonight.
If you want to go,
Sure, I
or I'll
will.
go again. whatever.
No, let's workshop. Let me jump in here.
Okay.
I agree with Commissioner Barnett's comments, because I think we have to go back and look at this, what we were trying to accomplish before the Great Recession, and you know, that was then, this is now. We're dealing with the new normal. Back then, there were a lot of components of the agreement that made sense. We managed what the redevelopment agreement costs were, and we were trying to achieve two goals. One was we wanted to increase EAV for the TIF, and we also wanted to generate as much sales tax as possible. Those continue to be our goals, and I see those three goals before us here. You know, how do we accelerate the EAV for purposes of achieving that goal of the original agreement? And we have an opportunity to do that here, which I think makes a lot of sense. So that's a yes. The second goal was to generate sales tax, and we're not saying we're not going to be generating sales tax. We're just simply allowing for more flexibility with respect to this particular development. That doesn't mean that we're not going to achieve the sales tax goal. We're just not mandating it as we did in the past. Commissioner Waldeck mentioned, well, would there be incentive opportunities? And we can do things with a carrot or a stick, and really all we're doing is we're not saying there's any less desire to pursue maximum sales tax generation from any location downtown or anywhere in the village for that matter, but we're just switching from mandating it to perhaps, if an opportunity presents itself that made sense, incentivizing it. And we have other incentive agreements in the downtown where there's a desirable use that generates sales tax that we'd like to keep in place. So those opportunities do exist, and if the numbers all work out, there's no reason, to answer your question, Commissioner Waldeck, why there couldn't be some use on that property that might make sense for some kind of agreement. I don't know what that is. Nothing's been brought to our attention, but you know, if it makes sense and is a win-win for the community, then by all means we would consider it. And we did that with the lemon tree, so I mean those things happen. So I don't see us as losing anything on the sales tax. It's just become more of a question in terms of what that mix will be, and a little less certainty. But we certainly have other tools to utilize to encourage sales tax. And then the added advantage, which is the third goal, is managing the overall redevelopment agreement costs or our investment in it. And that's another yes box, as Commissioner Barnett said, because we're actually bringing that down. So I see this as two positive steps forward, and one that is not a step backwards. It's just you're just changing it from the stick to the carrot in terms of the tool that we use. So I think it certainly makes sense, and would love to see that project complete and up to 90% as soon as possible. I think that's That's one of our main goals. The only other thing I'll mention is, this is completely different but related topic, and I mentioned this to the village attorney earlier. The agreement states in multiple sections that everything has to be in full compliance with Illinois law, and we might want to just make sure that that concept of complying with whatever current Illinois law is also included in the section 13.1, the no discrimination provision of the agreement, which obviously the intent of all of that is to act consistent with what Illinois law requires. I don't think that's very controversial, but we might want to make that more explicit. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with most of what's been said up here. The basic reason for my comments was it was a controversy years ago, even before I came on council, why have a TIF district and why we were selling it, and the projections and everything, where there were projections on EAV, projections on sales tax. It was kind of a promise to the community that we would accomplish these things, and then it also became a promise to the retail businesses coming downtown that we would have a certain mix and certain goals. And I don't know, even in the letter we got from the downtown management referred to questioning integrity as to these types of agreements. So naturally, I was quite, it concerns me when sometimes when we have to balance what's expeditious with our long-term plans from way back when. We talk about our long-range financial plan that we keep referring to. Well, this was, in a sense, a long-range financial plan back then. Times did change. The agreement does look, good. I would prefer to do something that would increase traffic. So, if there's something that comes up, any thoughts, I hope we can take advantage of it. I think it is a pretty decent agreement, and I enjoy my retirement. If I was to open up a business and needed an office, I had a tour of the building some time ago. It's an absolutely beautiful building. And with the parking near the parking deck and all that, I think it's a great location. I think it's a fabulous place. And even if you go back in the minutes, when we were talking about the previous agreement and Acadia and the Green and the like, I was hoping to see more office space down here because we seem to have a lot of success with our occupancy. I think we've had better than 90% all the way through. Which is pretty darn good. So I will be supporting this agreement. Always hoping for better. If we can do better, let's get at it. But it does look good on its face. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't think that, lest there be any mistake, I don't think we've in any way, shape, or form abandoned our twin goals of maximizing EAV or maximizing sales tax revenue. I don't see that as this is doing that at all. I think this is simply continuing to pursue those twin goals in the face of what was extraordinary adversity from the Great Recession, and just simply recognizing that things have changed. One could even argue Commissioner Barnett's favorite phrase, force majeure, is taking place. To the extent there was some promise made 6 years ago, I think a lot has changed, and today, I would say it differently. I think we're actually continuing to pursue that promise within the means available to us under the current circumstances. That's kind of the way I see it. Sure, you could require that there's a certain mix remain in place, but if the consequence of that were for a property to remain fallow rather than become prosperous, I don't know if that would be meeting the promise, or if you want to call it that, or the plan was probably a better word. I view this as actually adhering to what was intended as best as we're able to, given the current circumstances. Sorry, Commissioner.
That's okay, not a problem. With the TIF expiring, what, 2020, we only have 8 more years left on it. And I think what this revision to the agreement does, or what the new agreement does, is really allow an aggressive developer to sell the condos, office space, which will, again, enhance the revenues that are coming into the TIF itself. And to be honest, I think one of my colleagues said, this is probably not the really prime retail space in the village. I'm sure it's been very difficult to fill, and in a difficult economy, it's even worse. And if you can bring doctors, whatever kind of retail or whatever space he's going to fill it with, again, you're going to get foot traffic for the downtown. We have a lot of new restaurants that need people to eat there in order to prosper. And if this will help enhance the other businesses in the downtown, then I'm all for it. You know, I was not real thrilled about the gym.
ATM.
ATM, thank you.
You'll be getting letters now.
I probably will be, going into that space. But, you know, it has proven to bring people into the downtown. You watch them go from there to the restaurants or shopping or whatever. So I think it has done what it was supposed to do, but in a somewhat different way. So again, I will be supporting this, mainly because we need to be aggressive and we need to get the space filled, and an empty building is not doing anything for anyone. So if this can get the building filled by 2013, I think it's great.
Other questions, comments? All right, thank you. Next item, please.
The next item is consideration of an award of contract for Village Hall parking lot lighting. Here to present this item is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
Good evening. This is a motion requested to award a contract for the Village Hall parking lot lighting to John Burns Construction in the amount of $179,979. This project consists of replacing the 66 cube lights that you see around Village Hall parking lot, the police station, and the commuter lots right on this site. They're rather old fixtures. They're old mercury vapor lights, which are no longer manufactured, and they're beyond their useful life, and we've seen a number of outages with them. What we're recommending is replacing them with new high-efficiency LED lights, which use about a third of the energy that's required for the existing lights, which a life expectancy of about 100,000 hours. We would be supporting this with a grant for about $12,300 from the Illinois Energy Now program, which is a state of Illinois program that encourages the use of high-efficiency lighting for public spaces. Because of the fact that we're also looking at alternative uses for this space in the somewhat near middle future, these fixtures would also be able to be used at an alternate location if we were to decide to move them somewhere else, so they would be reusable. We did issue a call for bids. This plan set was put together in-house by staff, and the bid documents were publicized. We received 7 bids for the project. John Burns Construction was the low bidder, and they have satisfactorily completed projects of this nature for the Illinois Tollway in the state of Illinois, and we recommend approval of this contract to John Burns Construction. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nan. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tom LaCren, 545 Chicago Avenue. I just have a question with these LED lights. Do we have empirical evidence that they're coming anywhere close to meeting their expected life, whatever you call it, expectancy? Because from my own experience, I had an electrician come into my house, do some work, and I asked him about the LEDs and the CFLs and all that stuff. He recommended not using LEDs, at least in the home, because they're not meeting their life expectancies. So do we have actual proof that these things are actually doing that work other places? Thank you.
This is a technology that's improving all the time, and that is something that we've been monitoring, and we feel confident that this is a great application for this use. They do fail in a different way than you're used to a typical light. They just don't go out. We've had LED lights in our traffic signals for about the last 10 years, I believe, and they're still in service. They do fade gradually as the diodes, individual diodes on the fixture go out, so they're still in operation, and when they get to a level where they're not acceptable light, then they get replaced. But they have been successfully used with our traffic signals, and I think you'll see us continue to use those more in more applications.
But truth be told, we won't know the answer to that question for about 11.415 years, will we?
100,000 hours.
But if I may, since we're workshopping,
Any other questions from the audience before we go to the council? Commissioner Waldeck.
okay, no, to the point, we have to do something because the lights we have now cannot be replaced, and they're going out, so better the LED than what we currently have, so we're gonna have to spend something to keep the lots lit. That was my comment. I support it.
Thank you. Commissioner Newstead.
Other than the traffic lights, we use them in the parking garage. If we had experienced any issues with them in the parking garage?
No issues.
Thank you.
And as well as the Prentice Creek Streetlight Project, the hybrid lights are LED as well.
I wasn't good.
And we just did a LED relamp in one of our subdivisions last year
Okay.
as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barnett.
Thanks, Mayor. This is kind of a rabbit trail, but in general, this is a good example. Is there a way to keep sort of track over the course of a year, or am I just missing it? We already are. We got a $200,000 budget for this item, and a $179,000 bid, and a $12,000 grant. Is there a way to kind of over the course of a year, we're about to talk budget as well, you know, kind of keep this running total of how we're doing on this stuff?
We do keep a running total on some of these things, and we use it a lot at the staff level. Sometimes you'll see us, rarely something comes in over budget and we put a line in there that says budget authority exists to do this project anyway. It's because we're getting good bids on other projects. The other place it comes up is at the end of the construction season, we have opportunities to do roadway patching and parking lot patching, like for commuter lots, et cetera. And so sometimes we'll come back to you with a change order that says, let's take some of the savings from other projects and use it in needed patching areas. And we might actually have an opportunity to do that later this year on a parking lot project. So we do track it, and we use our money wisely if we receive any savings.
I'd like to find a way to keep us a little more posted, you know,
Will do.
not every month or anything, but maybe quarterly or a couple times a year, get a sort of a status update on that.
Yes.
Commissioner Rankin.
I was actually kind of along the same lines. So we came under budget, and then we're also going to get reimbursed for a grant besides the amount of savings from the good bidding. That's great. So it's like 32,000 under our budget. That's something to brag about. That's great.
Just one last thought. We also have to track the revenues. Remember, these revenues that also fluctuate with economic conditions. So it's not just the expense side. We also track the revenue side. So we can get that information too.
Great. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, with these new parking lot lights and the other lights that we've been using, I know one of the concerns that was brought up when we talked about the street lights or the stop lights years ago was the fact that the new LED lights don't generate a lot of heat, so they're not very good at melting snow or ice or whatever. With these lights in the parking lot, do we have a picture of what the new light's gonna look like? If I remember serves me correct, it's like an old-fashioned light, right? I mean, it's not-
They are. There's a demonstration of it right outside the front of Village Hall.
How are we expecting those to melt snow and ice? Because their main job is to light up our parking lot. I mean,
It's a globe, so there's really nothing on there to hold snow. I mean, I suppose if you had a certain freezing rain, you know, they could catch onto it, but we really have been monitoring our traffic signals and haven't observed that to be an issue for the traffic signals.
okay.
Other questions? I'll only make my perennial comment that every time I see any money being spent on either the police station or Village Hall, it reminds me of the extraordinary need to have a permanent solution to our facilities challenge, which I know we'll be discussing in short order.
Yes, we will.
So I appreciate the fact that these are reusable. and can be used elsewhere. Otherwise, to spend six figures on,
Yeah.
well, enough said. Next item, please.
Next item is consideration of amendments to traffic and parking provisions. These items have come out of the Transportation and Parking Commission, and Nan has additional information on these items.
This is an ordinance that's been prepared to amend various sections of the municipal code with a series of generally housekeeping and minor parking and traffic changes in three areas that are a result of modifications from construction projects at the Belmont Road underpass, in the area of Downers Grove North High School, and from implementation from the 2011 downtown parking study. With respect to Belmont, they are out there paving now and will be close to doing their striping. They've got most of their permanent signage in, and the changes included in here include some stop control on Warren and Burlington, which are new intersections with the ramps. It also includes adjusting location along Burlington and Warren of some daily fee and permit parking, and allowing some space for the Grove shuttle to pick up commuters in the afternoon when they get off the platform on the north side to make their trip a little more convenient. The last one is some turn restrictions where there's some no left turns off of Belmont onto the to the west and the east loop. So those are all generally minor housekeeping items and traffic control changes that'll make that area operate better. In the area of Downers Grove North High School, the major change here is that the bus operation was moved from an on-street operation to an off-street parking lot, which is, we're just amending the code to reflect, to take those restrictions off the street where the bus operation used to occur. There is also for an all-way stop that had existed at Prince and Grant, which weren't in the code, which as long as we're doing this, we're adding this to the ordinance. And we're adding a mid-block crossing at Saratoga that'll facilitate the sharing of parking and field use between the middle school and the high school there. So those are the three major changes in the area of the Downers Grove North High School. And lastly, there's two relatively minor changes with respect to the operation of the parking deck. On the top level, we had been operating that as a combination of permit parking and on daily fee parking, but not until after 8 p.m. for the daily fee. It was leading to a lot of confusion by users, and it wasn't being fully utilized, as we find that with 100% utilization for levels 3 and 4. So what this does is it converts level 5 to the same operation for daily fee as level 3 and 4, beginning at 5 a.m. in the morning. And it reduces the amount of permit parking to reflect what's currently number of permits that are issued right now. So it reduces the permit parking and opens up the daily fee parking to be more fully utilized. And I did take a drive through there this morning, and we did put these changes in effect under the manager's authorization earlier to gauge how the operation would work if it took away the operational issues we were concerned about. And not only are all the daily fee permit space, all the daily fee space is 100% utilized, but we've dramatically decreased, I don't think we've eliminated, I'd say, all the calls we've gotten and issues we've had with commuters out there, so it's been very effective. The second change we're recommending is moving the motorcycle spaces that had existed on the east side of Forest Avenue, just south of Burlington there by the library. We had 7 designated commuter motorcycle all-day spots there, and what we have done is to move those into the parking deck. Because they are all-day parking, they're undercover, and they were put into the spaces that were unused by regular parking spaces. So we were able to move them off the street, open 3 spaces up for additional parking, which was recommended by the downtown parking study, and those seem to be well used as well, both the on-street spaces and the motorcycle spaces. And that summarizes all the changes we're recommending, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you again. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Good evening.
Evening. David Olson, 5601 Dunham Road. So I think this parking deck changes are the most interesting. So the interim, these changes, when were those changes implemented?
I think there was about a month ago.
Okay. And do you know how was that marketed to commuters? Was the signage just changed? Because I sometimes use these spaces and have colleagues that use these spaces. And I was still under the impression that the top level was until 8 a.m. And so this was interesting to see on the agenda. So.
I think the question was, how is the change being communicated to those who are most likely to utilize the spaces in the parking deck?
We did not put out a mass mailing or notification. Those spaces are, I think people kind of monitor the downtown. People are looking for commuter spaces. There were always people looking for spaces up there that were turned away. So essentially, they're being used by people that were always looking for spaces, that were always looking in the deck and up the top level. And they've just been filled in by people, I think, who have found out about them just by going up there in the mornings.
I just want to add, there wasn't so much an active marketing or communication campaign by the village, but we certainly did talk to the affected people because we had a series of complaints, questions and conversations that were ongoing because of the original condition. And believe me, I heard many of these conversations taking place right outside of my office, and we made the change. Those conversations stopped, and so the test period seems to be working quite well. And now we can go finish up with our other communications, but so far so good.
One last question, apologies. Has the village studied when these parking spaces, the daily fee parking spaces, generally fill up at this point? Are there still spaces available for commuters who might want to park there after 8 o'clock?
Typically, I think where people most reliably found spaces still, even after the 8 o'clock train, I think are on Warren, east of Washington. That's usually where I see spaces still available, and I think when people call, that's usually where we refer them to in the downtown area. Just like on Belmont, on Burlington, on the far west end, there's usually areas around the station where you can still find spaces for those later express trains.
And we did study in detail when those spaces fill up, who fills them, when, how they turn over, et cetera, in detail in our downtown parking study that's available on our website. Just go to our homepage, hit the search button, downtown parking study, and you'll get all that information.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Questions from the council? Commissioner Neustadt.
The bus loading zone on Prince Street, those signs are coming down. What is that going to change to? Is that just going to be still no parking then along Prince?
It would be the same regulation that's up in that area now.
Which is no parking anytime? Okay. Is that ever going to change, or can we consider changing that going to the south in front of, there's some residential uses at the south end of the high school property? I know that in conversation there's always been, we've never been allowed to park there at all because of the use for the high school. Maybe something to keep our eye on as the use changes and gets into the lot, if we could open that up maybe for weekends or after school hours or something like that. So those residents could have folks park on the street for parties and family events and things.
This area is the subject of our neighborhood traffic study that's ongoing right now, so this is a change we're comfortable with making now because the school operations have changed. There may be further changes based on the outcome of the neighborhood study.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schnell?
With the crosswalk between the west parking lot and the junior high, how are we going to protect the integrity of the pedestrians? I mean, is it going to be one of those wonderful signs that people blow at Commissioner Barnett's house that say stop for pedestrians and crosswalk? And I mean, how? My concern is
We appreciate him taking that off his front lawn.
I do too. But I mean, how? Once you put a crosswalk in, people assume it's safe, and I think what we've learned, even in downtown, is that isn't always the case. So, especially with kids and driving that street a lot and watching kids not looking and just going across the street now, how are we going to protect the safety of people?
We are going to put in the advanced warning signs and the crosswalk signs, and we will look at the application of putting a mid-block crossing in like we do have on Main Street and we do have on Maple. We look at the visibility and we'll look at the speeds and see if that's warranted at that location.
Okay, so it will have one of those beautiful little yellow signs that say stop for pedestrians and crosswalk? And then are we going to have the flashing lights too, or?
At this time, we're not planning on flashing lights, but that's something that
I'm not saying we need them. I'm just trying to, again, in my mind, figure out what's going to be done so that people who have stopped at the four-way stop and then speed up to get to Ogden know that in mid-block they're going to have to slow down because there's going to be people walking across the street.
Well, it's something that we'll look at with the neighborhood traffic study, and it's something that we're also looking at with the update to the pedestrian plan and looking at recommendations there for mid-block treatments.
I guess, from my perspective, is it because the parking lot's there that was where it was chosen as opposed to up, further up past the soccer field?
There's a walkway between the parking lot and the soccer field, so I think that that's just a natural break.
I've seen it, and I've also seen, recently people crossing there. And it really makes me nervous. Because if you slam on your brakes, not that you go that fast, you're going 25, but if someone all of a sudden decides to dart across the street, you slam on your brakes, the guy behind you may not.
In a non-official conversation that I had the other day, I think that once the field is done on the east side of Saratoga, the new ball field, that there should be less crossing of students across the street, but I think early morning football practice and things like that during the summer is still going to be used at Eric's Field, but hopefully there won't be as much once that field is done.
Okay, it makes me nervous. It makes me very nervous.
It's also from observation during use of that field. There's a lot of youth soccer games that happen there. Nan's observed them, her teams. I've been to several in the last couple of years, and so we try to put the crossing where it's most natural or more likely to be used. And it is true, the school district 99 is well aware of the potential of safety concerns, and so one of the reasons they changed the design of that field surface is to make sure that they're not crossing over to Herrick as often. So
Okay, that's fine. It's just, as I said, it makes me nervous, and since the new parking lot has gone in, I've seen people, crossing and not necessarily looking, just crossing, and once you have a crosswalk in there, there's going to be more of that. So I don't want a tragedy, I guess is the best way of putting it, so, okay.
Well, I think too, we're playing soccer at that field right now, and there, you have to park on that side of the street, so having crosswalk is going to be quite an improvement. It's very dangerous right now, so.
Yeah, either way, I think it's going to be somewhat dangerous, because you'll have kids who are, anyway. Well, hopefully, people will slow down once they see the warning that a crosswalk exists. We've seen that it doesn't always happen, so we'll see where it goes. But that's going to be that is one of the things that is being studied in the neighborhood plan right now?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
We, of course, could introduce the pedestrian flag idea that I saw in Florida, where there's flags on one side of the street and people carry it across the crosswalk. It sounds cheesy, but it really did help stop traffic, especially in like a Main Street situation.
Was it right between two schools, though, in Florida?
It was actually on a main thoroughfare.
I can see those flags
fast
being
two-lane.
used.
I was going to say, I think I've already seen them on eBay.
It worked. Sounds goofy. It worked.
High school flags, I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's true.
You can find them in Commissioner Newstadt's lawn at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, thank you. One of the local media news is 10 o'clock news channels did a coverage of the Illinois law that states that you are to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. And can we get some information on how many tickets we've given or written for people that have not stopped for those on Main Street? Because this is a valid point. We're all here saying it's dangerous. We're talking about moving flags, we're talking about kids in soccer. There's so much. But I really believe it comes down to the enforcement. Just like everybody knows, you don't speed on Fairview because that's always highly patrolled.
As are all of our streets in town, so we don't want you to speed
But
on
I
any
think the
place.
ticket writing really illustrates that. So if we can get some sort of information on that.
We'll get you some information on number of tickets for failing to yield to pedestrians, yes.
And where these signs are.
We'll get all of them to you as well.
Please let Chief Porter know that he needs to patrol the other streets too, please. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Thank you. Next item, please.
And the final item is the continued discussion of the proposed FY 2013 budget. We did have our budget workshop on Saturday, and in that 3 hours or so, we did get through the presentation of the entire proposed budget. We had great conversation among staff the council and members of the community. We have no further presentation because we got through it all on Saturday. Staff is currently working on responses to several questions that were asked by council and members of the community. We will post those responses on our website and send them out to the council on Friday. Also on our website, you'll be able to find a link to the video from Saturday's meeting. So if you were unable to attend, go ahead and click on that. You can watch and listen as you see fit. Finally, this is just, there are many opportunities to participate in this year's budget discussion. If Tuesday nights are not convenient for folks, they can come to the Coffee with the Council on Saturday, October 20th, 9 a.m. at Fire Station 2, which is dedicated to further discussion of the FY13 budget. With that, we're happy to answer any questions.
And will all those dates for additional opportunities for public comment on the proposed 2013 budget be on our website, Mary Fieldman?
They are, and you can find them conveniently located on page 1 of the budget message. So just click right there and you'll see the dates. We continue this discussion all the way through the middle of December for budget and related items.
Terrific, thank you. Well, since this is one of those opportunities for discussion, in fact, this is opportunity number 2, for discussion of the proposed fiscal 2013 budget, I will, unless there's any council members that have any introductory comments they'd like to make, I'll open it up for discussion, comments, questions from any members of the audience. This will not be the only opportunity, as Manager Fieldman mentioned. There will be multiple additional opportunities, and of course, we are always available by phone, email, letter, in person, to entertain any questions or comments with respect to the proposed budget. Anyone with questions? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully, Commissioners, staff. I'm Gordon Goodman. I live at 5834 Meadow, and I would have liked to have been at your presentation on Saturday, but Pierce Downers Heritage Alliance was cleaning up Highland Avenue that day. And
thank you.
It was a good day to do that, and we were pleased that there it wasn't quite as much debris as we usually find on a cleanup. So I wanted to congratulate the community on that too. My question is about the items on page 532 of the budget. It's a summary of the additional funds that are in the general fund, and I'm particularly interested in Fund 867. It's called Local Community Grants, and the definition is provides funding to assist eligible local community groups administered by the Community Grants Commission. This program was suspended during the 2010 budget process. And so during the 2013 budget process, I hope that the council might give some consideration to lifting that suspension and beginning again to support eligible local community groups. And I wondered if the staff has some background, something in the budget workup that might be available to the council should they decide that they would like to consider the possibility of lifting that suspension.
The staff information, excuse me, Mayor, the staff information is exactly what Dr. Goodman just quoted. This was suspended in 2010. And we have not funded it since then. The Community Grants Commission remains on the books but inactive, and staff would react to any policy direction given by the Village Council.
The further background, and sorry, I didn't mean to jump in front of you there, the further background is, of course, that the Community Grants Program was historically funded by a portion of the hotel motel tax that was, I believe it was 8%, that was brought in and dedicated to providing a pool of funds that varied from year to year depending on what the 8% revenue take was. And then those dollars were then provided for grants that met certain criteria by the Community Grants Commission, primarily to fund local arts and other types of events in town, and the criteria were spelled out and actually the subject of quite a bit of discussion from time to time by the Community Grants Commission. And the long and short of it is, as I understand it, and it was a couple of years ago, but due to the Great Recession that we've talked about earlier, quite frankly, that 8% revenue from the hotel motel tax need to be redirected to other needs. And the Community Grants Commission, and the possibility remains in the books because it is possible that the 8% could be redirected back to support community grants, but I'm not aware of any current proposal to do that, but I don't believe that means it'll never happen. I think that it's one of those stay tuned things. But the easy way to do it would be, as I think Manager Fieldman was suggesting, that as a policy direction, the council decided to redirect those funds back to the Community Grants Commission. That's what it would take to restore it. It's just there isn't currently a proposal to do so, but that would be the lever to pull, so to speak.
My understanding of the staff response this year and in previous years is they will do nothing until there's policy direction from the council that the council is interested in finding out if there is adequate available funds, if that redirection of the hotel tax money was to be used for this purpose again. So nothing is going to happen until 4 of you say, we'd like you staff to look at this. It's not going to happen magically.
No.
It's not going to happen if I come up here or 100 other people come up here. It's only going to happen if the council decides that it would like to investigate this. The staff is waiting for that kind of guidance in some future year, if it's ever going to lift the suspension.
Dr. Goodman, you and I are saying the same exact thing.
Right. I'm just saying it a little more pointedly, that it's up to the council.
No question about it. It was the council that redirected it in the
Yeah.
first place by policy decision, and it would have to be council that would redirect it back if that was the direction. And, candidly, it's probably something that could be the topic of a future long-range planning discussion. Is there sufficient long-range revenues, given everything else that's going on, to warrant that redirection? And I sit here right now, I don't think we're prepared to have that discussion, but it's certainly, the Community Grants Commission has not been eliminated. It's still there, it's just currently not funded.
The other point I wanted to stress was it was part of the budget process for 2010. The council had a long-range plan which did incorporate the community grants. It had the staff budget money for the community grants, but during the budget process, which we're now involved in 2010, during that process, at the last minute, the council said, oh, yes, let us give you some policy direction. We will not be actively using this. We'll suspend this type of work until future notice. And so I'm saying maybe it might be worthwhile as part of this process, before you get to the long-term financial plan, to give the staff some guidance that maybe next year in developing your long-term financial plan, you ought to look at the possibility of the community grants. Even if you're not going to put them into 2013, somewhere along the line, the council has to say, staff, look at this again, or it's never going to happen.
Right.
And I would like the cart not to be before the horse. You don't have to do the long-term financial plan. You have to instruct the staff to do the long-term financial plan, taking this into consideration again. That's where the horse should be.
Well, I think the horse can say, and we don't have to decide this now, but we can certainly take it up when we start entertaining those kind of inputs, because the question's been raised, what is the future fate of the Community Grants Commission? Commissioner Waldeck's raised that in a different context, and I think it's a fair question, is where is it going to go? And the answer to that question is whether or not the funds are ever going to be redirected or not. And I don't know whether that's next year or 2015 or 2020, I don't know, but it would be a fair subject of long-range financial planning. And I don't think anyone up here would disagree that revisiting that to see whether or not it can be done or not, or whether that's a direction would not be a proper subject. So I for one, would welcome a discussion of that, and if the answer is too early to tell, then so be it. If it's something else, then that's fine, but I don't think there's been any direction to not consider it. It's just that the revenue stream for it was redirected, and now the question would be, can it be redirected? So I guess I'm asking the question. I think it's a fair question. It's been, what, 3 years? It was a fair time to reconsider as part of long-range financial plan, at least from my own perspective.
Well, thank you.
I guess this opens up a much broader question, which again, would, if indeed it was ever to be considered, would be part of long-range financial planning, is obviously the arts are very important to Dr. Goodman and other people. I think there were other things that were cut that are equally as important to other people. And, you know, I don't think we could just categorically say, you know, we're going to give $30,000 to this or whatever it may be. I think as part of the long-range financial planning process, we really would need to say, okay, if there are monies out there that are not directed to, using the term core services, but directed to what we redirected everything to in 2010, then which of the programs that were suspended would be more than likely to be reinstated. And that's a fairly large discussion, I think, that would have to take place before we would have a much narrower discussion as to whether or not community grants would be reinstated.
Well, but there's a little bit of a difference. We have a community grants commission and a community grants ordinance sitting on our books. If the decision is to never fund it again, which may be the decision, then take it off the books.
But I think it would be a much broader discussion, as well.
Well, except that there are other things that aren't set up to be funded that just aren't funded. There are programs that have been eliminated completely, so there's nothing to fund anymore. You'd be talking about reinstituting something. My point is, as part of long-range financial planning, there ought to be a legitimate discussion. Is this something that we ever contemplate funding again? If the answer is yes, then there should be some sort of plan for doing that. If the answer is no, then why do we have it on the books? Why do we have a community grants commission? Why do we have that ordinance sitting there? It should be eliminated to manage expectations that it will not be funded, and therefore there should be no expectation of that. That, to me, is a legitimate topic. I'm not suggesting that we start piecemealing, let's go back to 2009 and figure out what wants to be restored. I think the question is a fair one. There's something that's sitting on the books. Is it an anachronism or not? That's the only distinction I draw.
I guess I just have a problem with being narrow.
I don't think it's narrow at all.
Well, you don't, but I do. So I guess what I'm saying is, and I think there are members of the public who would think perhaps it was narrow, simply because, again...
Identify for me another similar situation.
I don't even want to go to some of the ones I could think of.
But that are sitting on the books as a commission that's actually set up with members who are appointed, who sit there and don't meet because there's nothing for them to allocate. There's no such other thing.
And I understand that. But anyway, I'm not going to argue. But my concern is being very narrow with just bringing up that. And if indeed we are going to open up a discussion about monies that may be available, and I understand, I think we could separate the discussion, I guess.
I agree.
You know, separate the discussion, is community grants ever going to be funded forever? And if the answer is no, then just eliminate it all.
That's all I'm saying.
But I think then, if we would say maybe, then the discussion, from my perspective, would have to be much broader.
And I'm not suggesting that any discussion on long-range financial planning can't include whatever the 7 people in the room decided ought to include.
So anyway, I've been there, done that, and I think we finally got our ship in order, and it seems to be working well. And I'm not saying that the arts aren't important, they are, but just like other things found funding, perhaps the arts can find funding or can... Anyway.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying we have a commission of 7, we have members who are actually appointed to sit on a board that doesn't do anything because there's no funding for it. So it makes it unique in the sense that, are we going to take some decision long-term with respect that's going to continue to exist? Because if it continues to exist, there is some expectation, when talking about being fair to the community, there's some suggestion there that it will eventually be funded again. So the question is being asked is either, have the policy discussion and either decide, yes, we're going to keep it and fund it now, or yes, we're going to keep it and maybe fund it later under some set of criteria, or we're not going to fund it again because it doesn't fall within the parameter of what ought to be municipal services, and so then in that case it should be eliminated. That's the only reason why I'm drawing a distinction on this one, because we actually have a community grants commission that exists on our ordinances with members who are appointed who don't do anything. That sets it apart from the 20,000 other things that people would talk about that might want to benefit from scarce tax dollars. But in terms of having a discussion on long-range financial planning, which now we're way beyond the budget, we're talking about long-range financial planning.
That's right.
There's never been any limitation about what whoever's makeup of the council can discuss. In fact, that's why we have long-range financial planning, is to talk about what the direction should be that drives the budget. The budget we're talking about now is the result of prior long-range financial planning. And as part of that long-range financial planning, the direction was we're not going to reinstitute this yet. But the suggestion that Dr. Goodman was making is, okay, it's been 3 years, you've got a commission that sits out there with members that aren't doing anything, with no funding. What's going on? That's a fair question. Commissioner Newstead.
I think we need to be careful about if we have a commission with members or not. Most of the time, those appointments are 3 years. If it has been 3 years, we should probably double check to see if that commission is still
Staggered terms.
Okay, well then, I'm fine with having the conversation, but if we do have a commission, fine. If we don't, then that might be part of our answer. If we have enough members to have a quorum after the staggered terms, if we're going to have the conversation that Dr. Goodman has asked us to have at long-range financial planning, we need to make sure that we have a commission to talk about that's actually active and not. I don't know the answer to that, so.
Yeah, we have a commission and it has members, but there's no grant monies for them to consider
Right.
giving anyone because there's no funding for it.
Let's just clarify that the commission members are active and have official terms and they haven't expired.
We can take a look when we start talking about that next summer.
Thanks.
Commissioner Rankin?
Well, I wanted to agree with Commissioner Snow that it is a bigger discussion and it would include more areas than just community grants. And
Not saying it wouldn't.
just wanted to kind of echo what she was saying. I understood her point of view.
I just don't think that because it's going to be a bigger conversation means we can't have a conversation. I think that's an illogical fallacy.
But I could also sit up here and get somebody to second a motion and 2 other people to vote yes on XYZ program that was cut before, and it would be direction to staff, and we would have to find funding for it, of course, but then it would be back in. So that's the process that I think Dr. Goodman might be suggesting, that if there's 4 of us right now tonight want to have that conversation and say yes, we could do that. But I think after Saturday's conversation and seeing the outline of the budget and how well it was presented and how well it was prepared without this particular component, I think we're heading in the right direction for this conversation down the road as part of our long-range financial plan.
Which is all I was suggesting, is that the next long-range financial plan, not this budget, that as well as perhaps other things might be an appropriate topic of conversation that would drive the next budget. The budget we're talking about here tonight was driven by prior long-range financial planning decisions. That's all I'm saying. We're talking, I think that I took the request to mean the next time you sit down and do long-range financial planning, don't forget about this thing that's hanging out there. That's all I was saying. Everybody's getting so excited. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, I was getting excited because I thought I could reintroduce leaf program at some time of year. And I already had my first phone call about leaf debris in the street with the manager. So let me know when I can make that. May not get a second, but.
Go for it.
No.
It wouldn't be fall without leaves.
Or
Which is
the
good.
mayor telling us how many days before Rotary.
I bristle at the notion that we can't have conversations.
It's a workshop.
Exactly. I
Conversating, right?
don't understand that. Commissioner Barnett? Let's talk about this budget.
No comment.
No comment.
Next.
These are challenging conversations. They do better around a round table, I think. I agree both with. I agree with both the mayor and Marilyn. As much as it sounds like the 2 of you are arguing, I'm sitting back here nodding at both of you.
Don't think we're arguing.
No.
You know, Marilyn's made a point, which is that what we've done so far has, from many measurements, certainly there are others that would suggest it hasn't, but from many measurements, it's been said that it worked. I guess work kind of depends on your definition, but certainly it meets mine. But it's important to remember that the budget process we've engaged in over the last 3 years has been one that is, really dependent upon sort of a I don't know, almost 8 to 10 month kind of a process, because it involves heavily the LRFP. So to the mayor's point, if we wanted to start this discussion, I guess I'd suggest it's, while Commissioner Newstadt's right, it could happen now. I don't think that that's a real deliberative process. It's a little reactionary. If we wanted to include some consideration of this or any of the other similarly handled subjects over the last few years in LRFP stuff, I'm certainly open to that. I think that the process is important, and what LRFP is doing to try and feed our budget by, looking 1 year in the arrears and 3 years down the line as we build a budget is a pretty important step that I'd want to not short circuit on any one particular item now. So I could talk continuously and during the LRFP and probably bore everybody with some of the same old wording. I won't bore them tonight, but I think we've done some pretty good work that's working well, and I'd encourage us to put it on the list of stuff to talk about in LRFP.
That's all I was suggesting. I think the budget that was discussed on Saturday and presented is reflective of some great planning, as I think, I don't want to repeat all the comments that were made last Saturday. That's what I was trying to shy away from. I think everyone was very complimentary of the process. Everyone was very complimentary of all the great work by staff. I think everyone acknowledged and recognized that the good, solid planning that was done years ago continues to bear fruit. I don't think anyone's suggesting anything to the contrary. All I was saying is that a question has been asked about, okay, the next time you guys sit down and do this long-range financial planning thing, might you consider this thing that's hanging out there? That was the only suggestion. I didn't view it to be any more or any less than that.
I think we're obliged
I didn't realize
to,
it was going to touch off a powder keg.
I think we're obliged to, though, now kind of having sort of officially been asked. It should be something we all chime in on during LRFP.
Yeah, that's it. So, getting back to any further discussion with respect to the proposed fiscal 13 budget?
No.
Okay.
Wait, there's someone. Commissioner Walden.
Once again, just a couple items here. Something I brought up on Saturday, and we kind of touched on it tonight when we were talking about the lighting of the parking lot, is when we get those E-sheets or green sheets, whatever you want to call them, and we get that fiscal impact, and I thought it would be important, and we kind of touched upon it earlier. Right now, it's kind of a general statement. We have the money, we don't have the money. This came in over budget, but we can take from this one to put in the other one. I think what I wanted to see and what I asked for going forward for 2013 is that on that sheet where it says fiscal impact, to actually have excerpts or portions of the budget shown, where the money's coming from or where it's going, whether we're over or under budget, how detailed, some sort of an idea where, what line item, what part of the budget we're hitting on an ongoing basis. So, it's kind of like track your budget at home type of thing for the home gamers.
We're happy to say that the reformatting of the budget really makes it easy to do that going forward. We've added line item references, page number references, and I think that's something we can explore just carrying through all year. Not only, we tell you what fund it's in right now, but we can actually point to what line item in the budget and speak to Commissioner Waldak's questions, and speak to Commissioner Barnett's questions about tracking where we are. So I think we can do that.
Very good. And as has been brought up, there's a lot of things that we took out. A lot of people would like to see back in. Some people would like to see permanently out. I think not having that discussion, I think, is with this particular group. A lot of this budget, a lot of the discussion and the budget is driven by what was done earlier in the year, not just long-range financial planning, but other discussions, votes on, for example, the big one was the stormwater utility. That was probably, a good 40% of our overall discussion on Saturday. These are things that the way they were voted on early in the year really drove this budget as to where the money's going. Another major impact on this budget was the bond issuance. We voted on whether or not we were going to have a bond issuance. We voted for it. It passed, and now you have the money there. Now you gotta use it. You don't. It's like taking out a loan to fix the roof of your house, and the money's sitting there in the bank account, and you just don't decide to take a cruise. It's there to fix the roof. So, a lot of what's been in here has already been discussed and debated earlier in the year, so I would, from the public's point of view, if you're just tuning in now to the budget discussion, we'll probably have less discussion than usual because a lot of that has already been driven into this budget. And it's much easier to understand this time around too, so thanks for that. That's my current comment. As far as shuffling money around or anything like that, I haven't really heard anything as yet, so we'll just keep our ears open for suggestions and comments as we go through the process. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So, and I'm sorry to ask this ahead. Internally, do we track when we're going to make, spend certain dollars? Is it by month or by quarter? So like you could see how your expenses are tracking as the year is progressing.
We do. Some of it is exact science cash flow analysis, like we know when we get our property tax payment from the county to us, and that's very precise. Others are more cyclical. We know a quarter things tend to happen, and we know when we spend money on snow and ice control. We know when we tend to spend money on road improvements. We actually give you a summary of that in the general fund every quarter, and we tell you here's where the revenues are compared to the budget so far this year, and same thing on the expense side. So we do report that every quarter, and it is tracked in a lot of detail by our finance department.
Well, I was kind of thinking what Commissioner Waldeck was saying. So if we do have, we're doing road projects, we could say, you could say something that this account is tracking over budget or under budget,
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, that was
No worries. Other comments, questions on the proposed budget? We'll have lots more opportunities to talk about it. I just want to wrap up then this discussion at this point, and not to wrap it up only for now. Obviously, it continues with the 4 key components of this budget, which I think are important takeaways. As was mentioned, this proposed budget implements the stormwater utility that the council recently adopted, which demonstrates a continued commitment to addressing substantial stormwater management obligations and infrastructure needs within their community. It also reduces the property tax levy from the village perspective of almost $2 million, which is the second property tax reduction or property tax levy reduction in as many years. Third, it includes a balanced general fund, which once again is reflective of, I think, the good financial stewardship that council and staff have continued to demonstrate, and continues a substantial investment in infrastructure. In fact, increased investment in streets, sidewalks, and stormwater throughout our community, all of which have been identified for a number of years as major needs within the community, and we are continuing to make those investments to address those issues in a very, very significant way. I think there's a lot to be positive about in this budget, and again, it is reflective of a much longer and deeper planning process that has been underway for quite some time. So again, congratulations to staff on preparing not only a good news document, but a very user-friendly document. So thank you for that. And of course, we will have, as been said again, but it bears repeating, many opportunities for public input with respect to any aspect of the proposed fiscal year 2013 budget.
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 9, which is the mayor's report. And the only thing I want to mention here is that with respect to the ComEd report that I typically give, and this is with respect to reliability of electrical service in our community, we recently had our second annual town hall meeting with ComEd executives to not only drive a stake in the ground as to what progress has been made since the town hall meeting that was held last year, but also to come up with a new list of tasks that needed to be addressed by ComEd in order to enhance and maintain the reliability of electrical service in our community. And we're going to continue that effort. But we have actually been very pleased with the progress that has been made, and think that we can probably move the updates to a quarterly or an as-needed basis rather than weekly. I think the first year of progress tracking that from town hall meeting to town hall meeting was very important, and we will continue to have such meetings next year. So nothing is changing, our emphasis isn't changing. The fervor with which we advocate on behalf of our residents with respect to working with ComEd to keep electrical liability where it should be, and we actually heard from a number of folks, again, from the Deer Creek subdivision who've been having some issues recently. We'll continue to pursue that, but I will be giving these updates on a more quarterly basis, and then obviously as there are developments that warrant a report in between, we'll be doing that. So that is in fact the update for now. And I have nothing further under the mayor's report, so it brings us to item 10. Manager's report, please.
No report tonight, Mayor.
Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. 3 items to present this evening. The first is an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2013 budget in lieu of passage of an appropriation ordinance. An ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement between the Village of Downers Grove and Greenscape Ventures LLC. And an ordinance amending parking and traffic provisions in municipal lots at the Belmont Station underpass and at the local high schools. That is all.
Thank you. It brings us to item 12, council member reports and new business. I will first ask if any members of the council have any new business. Any new business for the council to consider? No motion for leaf pickup?
No, not today, maybe next week. I'll keep this.
All right, very good. Council member reports then. Commissioner Barnett?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one, couple of thank yous to issue. Last Friday, we had the village had a little kind of employee appreciation breakfast that I think was a good time by everybody, but I thought it was important to mention that the Lemon Tree Grocer helped out with that by providing the fruit that was served that morning, and downtown management in particular was helpful by providing all the sausages. It was a good time. I think everybody enjoyed it. I hope they did. But I wanted to make sure everybody realized that there were others involved in making that happen, and really say thank you to Lemon Tree and downtown management. So that's it.
Thank you, and thanks to them as well. Commissioner Durkin?
I have no report.
Commissioner Schnell?
I just want to announce that the yearly pancake breakfast that HDNA holds every year is going to be October 27th from 8 to 11 a.m. at Ballydoyle's once again. It is just, it's a great family affair. It's just a phenomenal experience. If you like cold pancakes, no. If you like pancakes, it was kind of no.
I see you're not on the marketing committee.
No, I'm not. I flipped those for many years. No, seriously, they are very, very good. But more than that, it helps support an organization that is just a great organization in helping to build young women's self-esteem and to help educate their parents as to the process of helping your daughter get through those difficult years of adolescence. So it's a great organization, great pancake breakfast, sausage, pancakes, fruit, coffee, juice, traditional pancake breakfast fare, very well prepared, served well by our village council, or many members of our village council, and our mayor will be there at 10:45 to draw raffles, I understand. I think it's 10:45.
Whenever they want them drawn?
Well, I think the email I got today said 10:45. So, but I just would hope that many members of the community come out and support the organization. It is their big fundraiser of the year, and it helps support the programs that they do throughout the year. So, again, the 27th from 8 to 11 at Ballydoyle's. And they are hot pancakes. Only kidding about the cold.
Delicious.
Delicious.
They are. They really are good. So.
Spectacular. Mouth water.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll stop before we go any further. Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. As we talked about earlier, we're in the middle of Fire Prevention Week, and there's a couple other great events that the Village of Downers Grove and the Downers Grove Fire Department put on each year. This Wednesday night from 6:30 to 8:30 is the night at the firehouse over at Fire Station number 5, which is right next to McCullum Park, so there's lots of parking. It's a great way to experience and see some demonstrations of what the fire service is all about, as well as a firefighter fashion show, which I just saw in there. That's always interesting. There's a lot of great things for kids about fire prevention and learn not to burn, as well as railroad safety, police and fire 911 call demonstrations. And then on Friday, the 18th annual Silent Parade will start in Hinsdale and head west down Maple Avenue. That starts around 7 p.m. in Hinsdale. At approximately 7:15 at Main and Maple is when the cortege will come through Downers Grove. So it's a great event. Anybody wanting to head to the ceremony afterwards, it's at Trinity Lutheran Church in Lisle, just south of Route 53 and Maple Avenue. It's a very moving parade that each year seems to get bigger and better, and the amount of apparatus that come to honor fallen firefighters is very very special, and I suggest everyone come out. To pay your own tribute, you can bring a flashlight and shine your flashlight back towards the fire department vehicles as they go by. It's a great event, and I suggest it to all. That's all I have tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin.
I wanted to remind everyone that the recycling extravaganza is this Saturday, October 13th, from 8 to 1 at the Village of Downers Grove Public Works facility. There is a list of accepted items on the Village of Downers Grove website. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. This Sunday, the Bears have a bye week, and there's the annual crop walk. We're approaching about 30-some years for the annual crop walk. Sunday at Gloria Dei Church. Starts at 1:30 for registration. They will step off at 2 o'clock. Proceeds for the crop walk, it is a crop walk for hunger. So 25% of all funds will go to places like, let's see, the PADS locations, Meals on Wheels, and the Walk-In Ministry of Hope. So for those of you who support those organizations, and it's going to be a beautiful day, and just get out there and walk and raise money. You may have some contacts at your local church. You can sign up in advance, or you can show up at 1:30 and register on Sunday. We expect beautiful weather for it. We always have great weather for it. Thank you.
Never disappoint. Thank you, Commissioner. I won't repeat what Commissioner Neustadt said about the Fire Prevention Week events that will be taking place later, other than to agree wholeheartedly that the Silent Parade is a terrific experience. If you have not participated in it in the past, I would encourage you to do so. It really is a wonderful, moving event. A couple other things going on. One, I know that the village is sponsoring a discussion, a meeting on a very serious topic, and that's the scourge of heroin usage and the devastation that's been wreaking in not just our community, but in a lot of other neighboring communities. And there's so much attention and interest in the topic that the location has been moved, I believe, to Downers Grove North. And I know you're going to find the date and the time, but just so anyone who is interested in attending that is aware of the new location.
October 25th, 7 p.m., Downers Grove North High School Purple Gym. October 25th, 7 p.m. at Downers Grove North.
Because this is really I hate to use the word epidemic, but it's a very serious issue in our community, and I'm glad to see that our police force is taking a leadership role in educating the community and doing what can be done to try to stem the tide of the loss of life and the other problems that have come from this epidemic. And again, it's not just a Downers Grove issue, it's Naperville, Hinsdale, it's all through the western suburbs, and I'm glad to see law enforcement stepping up and taking a leadership role in this, because it's a problem. I know it's a DuPage County-wide problem, and there have been recognition of it as such at many levels. And last, on a lighter topic, I know that there's a 5K this weekend, like Commissioner Rankin has spoken about, but there's another one that takes place in Downers Grove in support of Family Shelter Services, which has a location here in Downers Grove, and they're doing their annual Run for Her Life 5K, and they added a 10K run to this one. So if you want to run the course twice, which is a very hilly one, we'll see whether I do it twice. I would encourage you to sign up for that one. That's on October 21st, which begins and ends at Downers Grove North High School. It's always a well-attended run. Lots going on, lots of activity. Hopefully we'll have better weather this year than we had last year, and all, as usual, in support of a very good cause, and that is Family Shelter Services, which of course addresses domestic abuse, which is another problem throughout the region. So I encourage anyone that would like to go for a nice run within the lovely streets of Downers Grove, the lovely well-paved streets of Downers Grove. Here's your opportunity. I have nothing further at this point in time, so with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.